In this video, we take a look at the Sharp Garuda 4-stroke power sprayer versus a 2-stroke sprayer from a competitor. My name is Praveen Rajan and I am the Managing Director of Sharp Garuda Farm Equipments. And here you see me working on the very same engine that's fitted on our 4-stroke sprayer. We will go into the details of these power sprayers and we will be putting them through some real-world tests and some scientific tests. Warning: this is a long video with a great deal of explanation. So if you're in a hurry, I suggest you use the timestamps in the description to get to the part you're most interested in. So let's begin. Now the first part, the scientific tests, we'll be looking at three parameters: noise level, fuel consumption, and spray distance. The test setup consists of two power sprayers placed next to each other. We have a weighing scale with a fuel tank on top of it, and then we have a decibel meter that's placed at about 1 meter away from the sprayer. We fill up the sprayer tanks with water and salt because salt helps reduce the surface tension of water. In spraying chemicals, surfactants are commonly used as surface tension reducers. Now we'll take a look at how this two-stroke competitor product performs. The brand name has been covered to protect the identity of the competitor and to be fair. Noise level test. The two-stroke engine is idling away at its lowest RPM that's possible. And now we go over to the decibel meter to see what reading we have. Now as we get closer to the meter, we see that the value is reading at about 50 decibels. We will now increase the engine's throttle to raise it to the maximum RPM possible. And we take a look at the decibel meter for another reading, and this time we're reading 65 decibels, which is quite loud. Fuel consumption test. We will now measure the weight of the fuel along with the fuel tank at the beginning of the timer and at the end of the 2-minute timer. So the timer started. The weight of the tank is 372 grams, and we will fast forward and see what happens at the end of the 2-minute mark. The difference is what the engine has consumed in a window of 2 minutes, and we will use that value to find out how much fuel the engine would consume at the end of an hour. Now all this while the engine has been running at full load, as you can see from the pressure. Now we're coming up to 10 seconds, and we'll take the final reading when the timer reads 0, and it's 348 grams. So we're on Excel now, and we've brought in all the values that we know so far. So at the beginning of the timer, the weight of the tank was 372 grams, and then at the end of the timer it was 348 grams. So that's 24 grams consumed in 2 minutes. That equates to 720 grams per hour. And then we divide the consumption per hour, which is in grams, by density of the fuel, which is 0.72. And now we have consumption per hour in ml, that's 1000 ml per hour, or 1 liter per hour. So in this test, we try and figure out what's the maximum distance that the sprayer can reach. Now, right where I'm standing is where the spray has stopped. So we're going to use a tape measure to measure the distance between that point and the sprayer. It's about 19.5 feet. We are now going to use the 4-stroke Sharp Garuda Power Sprayer and subject it to all the tests that we've done in the previous section. Now we have to change the setup a little bit, mainly because in the previous setup we had used 2-stroke fuel, which is a ratio of 2T oil mixed with gasoline. And we have to use straight gasoline for the 4-stroke engine. We don't have to mix any oil for this. We connect the fuel lines from the external tank to the carburetor. And we start the engine. We repeat the noise level test for this engine. We confirm the engine is idling, and then we will move over to the decibel meter to have a look at the reading. And at idle we read 45 decibels. Now in the next step, we raise the engine to full RPM and we will read the decibel meter's reading. So we have on the meter 58 decibels. Fuel consumption test. So we will do a very similar procedure as what we did to the 2-stroke engine. So we start the test right when the meter is reading 438 grams. So that will be our starting value. We've got 30 seconds remaining. And then now we're at 5 seconds. And then we close the reading at 424 grams. That'll be our end value. So we're back in Excel with the new sheet for the values that we've taken from the 4-stroke engine, and everything remaining the same. The consumption per hour is 583 ml per hour. So that's just a little under 0.6 liters per hour. Spray distance test, same as last time. 4-stroke engine running at full load. The spray is going much longer than what we had for the 2-stroke engine. So we're trying to measure the value here. And then you'll see my tape. I've run out of tape. It's a 25 feet tape measure and I've already run out of it. So we're at 25 now, and I will measure once again with someone else helping me. So from 25 we go the extra distance and we figure out that it's another 6 feet. So it's a total of 31 feet. So now that we've got all the values required, now let's put it in a table and compare the 2-stroke competitor product with the 4-stroke Sharp Garuda. So the first parameter, noise level, the two-stroke is significantly louder than the four-stroke Sharp Garuda. So that results in better comfort for the user. The next parameter, fuel consumption. As you can see, the two-stroke consumes about 1 liter an hour, whereas the four-stroke Sharp Garuda only consumes a little under zero point 0.6 liter per hour. So that's about a 40% savings on fuel. And lastly, the spray distance. The two stroke is at 19.5 feet, and the four stroke Sharp Garuda is at 31 feet. Now, that's definitely going to cover a larger bit of land or taller trees, whichever the sprayer is used for. I'd like to draw your attention to the engine capacity and max power. It's interesting to see, while the Sharp Garuda is of higher engine capacity and delivers 26% more power than the competitor product, it still manages to save 40% fuel. Okay, so let's try spraying on a coconut tree and see if we find any differences. So here we have the 4-stroke Sharp Garuda Power Sprayer. The operator is aimed at a coconut tree, and it can be seen that the spray comfortably reaches the coconuts as well as some parts of the leaves. Okay, now let's try the same thing for the two-stroke competitor product. So here we go, it's the two-stroke power sprayer, and the spray is hardly reaching the coconuts. It's just about touching the coconuts, and you can hear the engine struggling. Now this tree is a couple of feet shorter than the first tree, and the spray is reaching the coconuts now. Now let me take you through some of the problems that we faced in the two-stroke competitor product. While we were testing, we noticed there was a fuel leak under the carburetor, and when we investigated that, we figured out that this part, it's called the primer bulb, and you can see the bulb is cracked open, so it's completely cracked. Now here's a better picture that you can see. There's a big hole in the primer bulb, and I'll tell you the reason for that. Now, before we dig deeper into this problem, we need to understand the two-stroke concept. Now, if you look at the third line on the sticker on this engine, it says mixing ratio 25:1. Now, what that means is you need to mix 1 part of 2T oil with 25 parts of gasoline. Now, you need to mix either 1 liter of oil with 25 liters of gasoline, that's a lot, or you have to mix 1 ml of oil to 25 ml of gasoline, which is very little. It's a good for nothing. Now, to make this mixing part a little easier for commonly mixed gasoline volumes, such as 500 ml or 1 liter, manufacturers do give you a little can with the box, and the can makes things a little easier with the markings there. It still needs a little bit of training, but it's easier than just working out the numbers by yourself. That being said, the can is not the end all be all solution for all the problems. So that brings us to the next slide, which is more to do with the two-stroke fuel's stability. Now, what I mean by stability is when gasoline is mixed with two-stroke oil, according to any ratios, the mixed fuel needs to be used up in a short period of time. It's not good to be left in the tank or in the engine for very long durations. And it certainly should not be used in an engine after prolonged periods of time. So, leaving such mixed fuel in the tank and in the engine for a very long time leads to stiff fuel lines and stiff primer bulbs, which is why the primer bulb in our example had broken in the two-stroke machine, whereas in the four-stroke machine that had not happened. That's because the four-stroke engine uses straight gasoline, whereas the two-stroke engine uses oil mixed with gasoline. I'd like to add a disclaimer here that straight gasoline also goes bad and causes deterioration of rubber components and exhibit varnish like texture, especially with the addition of ethanol in some countries. But it takes a lot longer and is less severe than oil mixed fuel. And if you ask me, I'd say stiff fuel lines and broken primer bulbs are the best case scenario because the parts required to replace those are relatively inexpensive and doesn't require a lot of skill to do so. Well, the worst case scenario is this stale fuel goes through your fuel system into carburetors, filters, and into the engine, thus coating your bearings and cylinder walls, piston rings. And the stale fuel becomes very sticky, very similar to varnish, and it loses all its lubricating properties. And your engine is up for replacement because it has already caused a lot of damage to your internals. Another risk that's associated with running two-stroke engines is operator skill levels when it comes to mixing the fuel and oil correctly. So let's say there's a case where the operator mixes very little oil to the fuel, which leads to lack of lubrication, and your piston rings, piston and cylinder walls are all scored up, and they're all vertical lines on them, and it's just not having any compression anymore. So you're looking at replacing piston, rings, cylinder, and in many cases even the bearings and connecting rods. So it's a very expensive affair. And on the other end of the spectrum, let's say the operator thinks more oil is better, so he adds a lot more oil than that's required. Now the ratio is well below 20 is to 1 or somewhere around 15 is to 1, which is a lot more oil for the gas amount of gasoline in there. What happens as a result of that is your spark plugs are going to get fouled with carbon very often than not. So there's going to be a lot of starting troubles. You'll have to keep replacing your spark plugs. And in the worst case scenario, adding more oil to the fuel also leans out the mixture. And leaning out the mixture means your engine runs too hot, and again you're going to have some failures that's associated with an overheating engine, which is again to do with your piston rings, cylinders, and all of that. So in either ways, you're looking at a very expensive repair. With a four-stroke engine, the probability of such mishaps are very less because you don't have to mix oil to the fuel. You just use straight gasoline fuel. And the lubricating oil is there in the sump, just like your regular cars and trucks. So that oil takes care of all the lubrication that's required. And while we're on the subject of engines, I thought I'll take a moment to explain why this is such a great engine. Now, you can see in the picture, this engine has got overhead valves that's driven by an overhead camshaft that's got a timing belt that's connected to the crankshaft. Again, very much like your modern car engine. The lubrication system on this engine is simply genius. The oil in the sump is made into a fine mist by the slinger that rotates at the same RPM as the crankshaft. The oil mist takes two paths. One goes through a hole in the crankshaft and into the crankcase, where it lubricates the connecting rod's big end and small end bearings. The other path goes through a transfer tube to the head of the engine, where it lubricates the camshaft assembly. After having done its job, the oil from the engine head drips back to the sump through an escape hole. Another beauty of this design is that this engine can run absolutely fine regardless of its inclination angle without any oil starvation. The air filter plays a very important role in determining the longevity of the engine and fuel consumption. Yet, it's the most commonly ignored component on these products. First up, we take a look at the two-stroke competitor sprayer. I would like to point out two things here. Easy explanation first. The filter element is quite flimsy and it may start deteriorating in a few washes. Now the difficult one. I'm gonna pause the video here as I need to explain this. You see, the most critical part in the air filter is in my right hand, and it's the hand screw. One day, the operator will have it misplaced while cleaning, and he's not going to wait for someone to get him a replacement because he's got jobs to do. So he starts the engine and goes to work, and sooner or later, your engine is seized due to dirt ingestion. And when you see brown build up in the exhaust port and on top of the pistons, you know what's next. Expensive repair. Whereas in the 4-stroke engine, we have a quick release system, so there's no chance of losing a screw, and the air filter is quite thick for better filtration and longevity. Now, I'd be lying if I said there's no disadvantage to the 4-stroke Sharp Garuda Power Sprayer. There is one. It's the weight. The Sharp Garuda 4-stroke sprayer is 11.8 kgs, whereas the 2-stroke competitor product is about 9.6 kgs. The extra weight is mainly attributed to two things: the slightly heavier 4-stroke engine and the thicker tank material for durability. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope it's been interesting, and I believe it'll help you make an informed decision when it's time to purchase your next power sprayer. If you've gotten this far, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Let us know in the comment section about what product you'd like to see in the next video. See ya!